will call this meeting to order. It is 11 o'clock, Thursday, February 29th, 2024. We're here to have a discussion on this concept of doing regular BOCC workshops. Commissioner Zimmerman, I think you should start us off since I think this was your idea.
Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to see if we can hold regular workshops to get some of our tasks finished, like the wrecking yard ordinance and maybe some of the planning that we need to do with the leased properties. And we've got a few other ordinances we on the back burner I think we can bring forward. And I believe we can work in front of the public. That's basically what this is.
Sure.
Now, can we, do we need to list what we're going to work on in our workshop each time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Yep.
we need to list the item that we're going to be working, so we really can't bring anything new to it.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Can we take action at a workshop like that, or are these non-action?
So the term workshop is really a figure of speech more than it is an actual formalized procedure. I think that we utilize that term to indicate that our intent is we're working through a project or an idea, when in reality, under Idaho's open meeting laws, they're really treated the same as a meeting. In that if it's a workshop that a quorum is at, then you have to comply with all of your same rules that you would for any other meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, like with the ordinances, with us working together, we're coming up with a plan that we're going to vote on,
Mm-hmm.
and that's okay to do that out in the public. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Because that's really the only mechanism
Yeah.
that we can do it together, right?
Sure. What you're going to see in some larger jurisdictions is they do differentiate internally between meetings and workshops, and some larger jurisdictions do that with specific definitions assigned to each. So to give you an example, some public entities allow public comment and public input at their meetings, but they won't allow them at a workshop. And so that might be a differentiation where if you list the item as a workshop, public still has an opportunity to be present and view, but they may not have an opportunity to have any input or speak, right? Juxtapose that against kind of this difference between a public hearing and a public meeting. Public hearing is a hearing under Idaho code that requires you to allow public input, whereas some public entities say, hey, at our general public meetings, we're not going to allow any public input. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a different way to differentiate between your internal procedures that are going to govern what you're doing.
Okay. Now, on titling this with the public, with a workshop, can we have, as long as we put, we're going to discuss, the leases here, and we're going to discuss maybe later on the ordinance, wrecking yard ordinance.
Sure.
We can have a couple items on there that.
Yep, you can workshop multiple items as long as they're all listed and separated out.
Now, what about stuff that, like Commissioner Dose has got a phone call and he needs to discuss something with all the commissioners? Can we do that at a public workshop? I mean, it's
as long as you list what you're discussing on your agenda that's going to post the workshop, then yeah. I really wouldn't get yourself bogged down with the term workshop.
Okay.
Unless you guys are going to internally define for yourselves a difference in your procedure.
Okay.
And the example I gave is maybe the most common one regarding, public participation. If it's going to be something where, hey, we're going to let the public know that it's a workshop, that means that you can watch, but we're not going to ask for input. Whereas our public meetings, maybe you do. Mm-hmm. Or maybe you do it opposite, right? There's no definition for the two. It's really up to you internally. So.
Okay, just to be clear on this, so we could make it an action item or we could make it not.
Yeah, typically your workshops are you working through something. That's the name. You can define it however you want, but I would say that your preferred course of action, your best practice would be if you're discussing something that's ultimately going to make it back before you in the form of an ordinance or a resolution or a new policy that's adopted, you probably want to take that finished work product and post it as an action item within a regular public meeting. And I think that that'll more clearly identify for the public what your intent is.
Okay. That helps. Okay. Well, since we're here discussing workshops, in my mind, the idea of maybe internally defining it so that it's clear to the public after a while, this is what we mean by workshop.
Okay, through a resolution? Or do we have to do it through a resolution, or do we just do it?
You don't necessarily have to.
Okay, we can define it.
Okay. Our goal, help me, Jeff, since our goal here is to conduct business in the public where the three of us two or three of us need to be together to figure out what the group wants or which way we're headed, or to work on a ongoing project.
Exactly.
Okay. How do groups function without workshops? I mean,
there's a number of
everything in
ways
public
that they
meeting?
can go about it. I mean, based upon the level of congruency between a board, some boards work really well together. Some boards in some places don't work well together. And all the quote-unquote workshopping happens with an individual person ironing out all the details of what they want an ordinance to be and then just presenting it back to the board in whole. And, I think there's certain benefits to working together. I certainly think that it can save taxpayer resources by being able to collaborate and all share whatever common ground it is you have to see if you can move it forward for the benefit of the county. At the same time, you also recognize that sometimes input, feedback, etc. might be gleaned from the community in a fashion that maybe the community isn't, willing to show up to a public meeting with, a camera in their face and be honest about their thoughts. And that, results sometimes in you as commissioners, you guys will get emails from the public, and somebody will stop you at the grocery store and share a thought or an idea, and that's just the reality and practical aspect of you being a public official. The important piece of that is if you're going to take information from outside of a public meeting and you're going to bring it back in some form of an action item, you've got to be able to identify a mechanism by which that information can be shared back to your board. So, I've oftentimes had, individuals say, well, if the governing body has to meet, in a quorum in a public meeting, how do I share my opinion that we need more of X, Y, or Z within the county? And nothing prevents them from ever sending an email to you, etc., sharing those opinions, or from you going out and seeking those. The important part is if that's going to be a piece of information you're going to take action on, you've got to grab that piece of information, put it into the public meeting, and let it be known that this is what you're basing your decision off of.
Okay. At a workshop, if our practice is to have the cameras on for all of our public meetings, we're going to leave the cameras on for our workshops too, aren't we?
I don't see why not. Or it's public anyway.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's...
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just sort of internally defining here. So
Okay.
probably not going to do action items as a general
action
rule.
items.
So that for you and I, as we're doing agendas, to think about that we generally won't be putting action items on workshop. Typically the topic will be something we're working on ongoing, not necessarily just to come and have a meeting and make a decision and vote, which
Exactly.
we call a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What do you think about this idea of public input?
We could probably have public input at the end
Of a workshop?
Of a workshop, if that's...
I hadn't even thought about it until today, so I don't know. What do you have any thoughts?
And, I think public input is good within our workshops to let the citizens express their concerns so that we can include those.
So
with
public
our thoughts.
input, no action.
But if we could limit it, because a lot of times they turn into a big discussion back and forth. But if we can limit to their thoughts, and so that
Okay.
Kind of like we do anyway with the public comment at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any other guidance you would share with us if we're trying to make an internal definition here of a workshop?
If you want me to be candid, other than the action item piece, it doesn't sound like you're giving it any other definitions in your meetings. So, but
Okay.
I like it when you're candid.
yeah,
That's what it was looking like to me too, as I'm defining this. I think the word workshop for us would imply that we're processing in a legal manner in front of the public something that we have to make a decision on in the future.
that we're working towards to complete the item is what I'm really kind of going towards, is so we can work together to get these ordinances, number one, moving so that we can get them completed. And it'd be easier to work on them together than one person work on it and then come back and then everybody else has different ideas, and we can kind of work together.
We can work together legally in front of the public
Yeah.
and get these tasks completed.
Yeah.
It's more like our checklist of getting tasks done,
Mm-hmm.
probably.
Exactly. Yeah, that would be a good way to put it.
Okay.
I mean, I'll just proffer the idea, and you guys don't have to like it, or maybe you do, I don't know. But for your public meetings, you currently are giving the public an opportunity to speak at all of your public meetings at the conclusion of the public meeting. If you want your workshops to be more interactive, maybe a difference is that you actually allow the public with permission to seek opportunities to provide input throughout the workshop. So if you're, discussing section 3 of the ordinance, well, while they've got a comment to make related to section 3, they can seek permission to give input and not have to wait till the end. So maybe that could be a difference.
But make it more workshop-like and less.
More interactive, yeah.
More interactive. Okay.
Does that make sense to
Instead of
you?
at the end throughout.
So that I could invite the public to speak. I mean, we could just say, wave your hand as we're going through this thing, if you've got an issue you want to speak to.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we've got a public input, a little bit more informal, that we could have it throughout. We're not really looking at action items, and we do need to announce a specific list of topics. We can't have a catch-all meeting. That's the problem, everybody.
Which also, and that also means that, I know you guys have heard me, say this before, it's also important that if we are allowing public input stays on point for the topic that was advertised.
Mm-hmm.
We can't allow a member of the public to come in and open up a new conversation about something that the rest of the public out in the community that didn't show up to the meeting didn't show up because they didn't know,
That was going to be.
John Doe was going to show up and start talking about X in front of the commissioners.
Okay.
And so I think it's also important. And as the chair, you get the benefit and the burden of being the one that, stops that kind of input when it comes and redirects it. So.
Yeah, right now, I have kind of tried to contain that to our regular business meeting, where it said it's reserved for citizens wishing to address the board relating to any county issue. Other than that, I'm trying to keep people on point. Which doesn't mean I always do it right, but once I figure out where they're going. Okay? All right, so topics now is public throughout, no action. Okay, and then we're going to try and do some kind of regular scheduling so that we have a workshop every week or two to keep making progress.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, so we would just continue a workshop, just stop wherever we are and have another one next week and continue on if we're still working through an ordinance or something.
Okay.
But I wouldn't use that language. We're not continuing a workshop, right? We're just...
It doesn't really matter if you're going to repost it onto the next agenda. I think where key trigger words like continuations are pertinent is when you actually have a public hearing as it's defined under Idaho code, because you do have specific notice requirements and due process. So.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, what we just thought we'd do is save all three of us one at a time going to your office and asking all these questions. We thought we would save you 2/3 of your time by doing this at one time. But any other questions while we have a captive prosecutor?
No, I think we've got them all answered.
Any other suggestions as we delve into this idea?
I think it's great. I think it's good to be proactive about these things. I mean, obviously, the county's got a lot of work on their hands already. So I think that keeping tabs on ongoing projects to ensure they get completed is important. And I know one of the projects that I brought before you guys, this last fall was a dog ordinance that had been 2 years in the making, right?
That's
And
one of the ones we got to look at.
being able to recognize, hey, the county's already invested time in this. So rather than let that time go to waste, here's our plan to get it across the finish line. Not saying that every one of these projects has to go across the finish line. Might be something you guys decide to scrap. But I think that it's better than losing track of it and it not getting completed just because we didn't recognize that we needed to keep the ball moving. So
Like junkyards, dogs. I mean, junkyard dogs could be a separate ordinance. You gotta have chairman humor. It's kind of like dad jokes.
of course, at Pine Creek, it might be junkyard goats, right?
Now you're hitting close to home. I actually don't, for the record, own any goats. So. Okay. Well, this is digressing. Any other thoughts or comments from the board?
No.
Or the prosecutor? Public input.
Well, I heard it both ways. Action item and non-action item on all these.
Probably the tendency will be to not be action items.
Because the previous prosecuting attorney, her opinion was that you couldn't do an action item on a workshop. I got the email if you want me to send it to you, but that was hers.
Well, that seems to line up with what I heard today and what we're thinking of doing is non-action.
Yep.
Okay, because I heard it both ways, so
That's because we were exploring it, but yeah, I think that's where we came down. Anything further?
no, that's it.
Okay. Mr. Prosecutor, I want to thank you for taking time out of the worst schedule in the building to come down here and help us out.
Pleasure.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Here to help.
Thank you.
With that, we are adjourned.